Opening clickety clack. Welcome to Evolution Hour. Isn't steampunk retro cute? Okie doke. Now let's see. Turn that little buddy off there. Welcome to the show. Here we are, sliding along through March. And we are now sliding along into ever more fun and games regarding the source base of Sarfati and Tay's creationism book on dinosaurs. Oh, one of the neat little things about scholarship that shows up in analysis of anybody that believes stuff that's not true, Tortugan stuff, and particularly in creationists, is ever take what they say at face value. Burrow down beneath. And this popped up as an absolutely delightful one because of about an Allosaurus name. And on the one hand, it gave an interesting historical bit where they were pointing out that Allosaurus was formerly classified as Antrodemus for over half the 20th century, 1920 to 1976. And Gregory Paul, which I will be drawn because it's open access. And that's what's fun. This little daisy trail that I began to follow. The little bit about everything was reclassified automatically as Antrodemus up to 1976. Wasn't actually in that paper. I began to kind of studying what the heck was going on with it. And paper had in fact only noted that, quote, Antrodemus is a nomen dubium. And then cited Madsen 1976, Paul 1988, and Glute 1987, and Holtz et al. 2004. Is no longer used by current researchers. No dates, nothing at all. So I started to look up, because when I looked up this terminology of this now extinct bit, and it reminded me immediately of the Apatosaurus, Brontosaurus, tussle, and all of that in terms of systematics. Naturally, Wikipedia came up, so I look at Wikipedia, and lo and behold, that is where that statement occurs about the 1920 to 1976 thing. Is it possible that they were riffing off of the Wikipedia account, not the paper they had just cited? Now, the Wikipedia account did in fact cite stuff on this, including Madsen. It specifically put the dated claim up and sourced it to the 1976 paper of Madison, which also is open access, as it turns out. I'll be putting a link up to that, except it hadn't actually said that either. So the Wikipedia account was not quite accurate. They were being a little too specific as to what was going on. The actual Madsen paper had said on page 10, a review of all subsequent nomenclatural changes would be tedious and unnecessary. The fact remains that since Zittel, 1890, page 722, assigned the genus Antrodemus equal Allosaurus to the Megalosauridae, it has remained there to the present. White, 1973, page 120, 121, generally unchallenged in spite of common usage to the Colbert and Russell, 1969, page 45. So now we're getting down to the brass tacks about it, is that this Antrodemus thing, along with the Allosaurus, was lumped in this megalosaurid group, and that terminology, megalosaurids, were still kind of knocking around, particularly among British paleontologists. Megalosaurids as really a version of Allosaurus, as is now more commonly recognized. But fun part is that both the white paper and the Colbert paper are also open access. So we can follow up even more about the point that was being raised by Madsen. And it turns out that the term Antrodemus and Allosaurus are cropping up in the white 1973 listing as separate items. And the only reason why it would be systematically regarded as superior to use the Antrodemus thing is because that's the way White wanted to view it, whereas he listed Allosaurus as a nomen dubium, which of course is the whole point that Paul was making about how it was classified. Now, we move over to the Colbert 1969 paper, where they are talking about Allosaurus as Allosaurus. No Allosaurus, parentheses, Antrodemus. They're paying no attention whatsoever to this. So, while it is possible that some paleontologists were routinely tending to treat it as Antrodemus rather than Allosaurus, what it sounds like from all of this background information is that, yeah, this one catalog and a few others did it as a technical bit, but really nobody was paying attention to it, particularly over here in the United States. So such a high dog as Colbert was simply treating it as an Allosaurus. So all of this little daisy chain, in addition to dealing with the whole systematic issue of what gets classified as what and how many fossils are done as what, they're really quite interesting little papers. So anybody that wants to look at them, I'll be putting the links up so you can kind of follow up on them. The nub of it was that Sarfati and Tay looked at the Wikipedia page, saw that little reference, decided to go with the Paul account rather than the Madsen one, and never thought to fact check whether or not that really was all that accurate a spin in the Wikipedia account. Whee! Oh, ain't scholarship fun, I can tell you. And in case any of you are wondering, this is iced tea. All of the time you see this brown stuff in there. Once in a while, when it's bloody hot, I might do a rum and Coca-Cola or something like that, but it's relatively rare, or occasionally even a sherry. I might go for a sherry once in a while, now being a little sherry glass. But anyway, that's iced tea. So this is a further indication of the superficiality of Sarfati and Tay. And so now my little radar, which we've already seen in previous chapters, is they basically retread. About half of the book is just creationist apologetics. They've only got 20% of their source base so far is from regular science papers. And of that, they are already misrepresenting or stepping around over half of them. So they're running it at the same percentage level of inaccuracy that we were seeing in the two Jensen books and also in Rupi and Sanford. We'll see how long that finagles along. The part 2 of the show, which we're getting to awfully fast, we're only 7 minutes in. I'm not seeing anybody in the live chat, so there may not be anybody popping in. The signal looks good. Has to do with something that isn't actually brought up by creationists at all, but is relevant to the issue, because in volume 2 of the Rocks Were There, we're going to be having a very detailed breakdown of the Ark Encounter kind list and what is organized to what. There's a new paper by Atkins Whiteman, which we'll be putting a link up from 2024 from PLOS ONE, on finding another Oviraptor from the Cretaceous Hell Creek Formation. And it's a little bitty one that Riley Black, for example, who used to be Brian Switek, he's trans, pointed out as Smithsonian Magazine. He describes it kind of parrot-like. We'll see whether or not some stupid creationist jumps to conclusions and thinks there's somehow parrot connections in there, but no, that's inaccurate. It's just slightly parrot-like in the way you look at it, because Oviraptorosaurs have kind of like a weird beak-like front end. They're toothless, interesting little bunch. Anyway, Ark Encounter treats the Saenagnathid family as a separate kind from the Oviraptorids. And we have to wonder why, because they look really, really similar and are very, very closely related according to the conventional systematics, like the stuff in that brand new paper. So you'll be able to take a look at the systematics of those two groups. And if you look up what the little critters look like, it would be an interesting notion to figure out how the hell they treat them as a separate thing, other than the fact that they're treated as separate families in systematics, probably based on some very deep little diagnostics, which we'll want to go through to find out why they're regarded as separate families systematically, even though you'd have to wonder why they would be treated as separate families from a baraminological point of view. Don't hold your breath that they're ever going to get around to that little aspect on it. So I thought this was kind of an interesting little sidebar to put in on the ongoing issue about creationist systematics. And just before I came on the show, in fact, there was a funky little bit from Erica, who was asking about whether she'd heard about that there was a creationist terminology study of therapsids, and it was asking, and Jackson jumped in and gave the answer on it. Is the fact it was only on one of the little families. We discussed it in Rocks Were There, and I went into it in even more detail in Evolution Slam Dunk. Shameless plug, buy the books. It was a really poor analysis that left out tons of material, even with the taxa that they were dealing with. M. Aaron, who we're not sure whether M. Aaron is a man, woman, maybe there could be trans people in the creationist community. Who knows? At any rate, he's done, I think, another it has done another them, they on I think a Tyrannosaurid bit has been done by that, but he's not a tremendously busy chap over there in Creation Science Land. So the neat thing is to work out what all of the systematics are and how they're coming up with the listings that they do. And I've mentioned previously that it's becoming painfully obvious that the Ark Encounter was basically plowing their way through the conventional evolutionary systematic literature for the order in which they were sticking their kinds on their list. And very possibly, given this Sarfati Tay episode that we've just analyzed here, my odds are going up that they probably are doing pretty much what I would be doing, is that they're looking at Wikipedia and finding out what the critters are and simply following the systematic listings boop, 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 that are listed in the Wikipedia accounts and operating that way. So I'll be keeping my eye out to see whether or not there's diagnostic clues on that, particularly in relation to some of the oddball taxa or what we find with amphibians and others that are going to be in the listing, both extant and extinct. So it's going to be a fun and game operation. Meanwhile, I'm also knee deep in the exciting world of filleting Gunter Beckley for Precambrian critters. This is for the new chapter for Rocks Were There Volume 2 that Jackson has completed, and then I'm going through and plugging in the material and getting the indexing structured and his sources in there and expanding as well, because it turns out there's even more Beckley stuff than what Jackson had brought in. There's Beckley did a whole long series on Kimberella and had done an additional whack at Dickinsonia. And Jackson had already identified quite a few spots where Beckley was not paying attention to the details of the paper. So that's been prodding me to look up this primary source material where even more examples of Beckley not paying attention to his sources. And he's playing fast and loose with some of the little bits. So it's going to be really funky. And also that there's a surprising amount, some of which I only discovered in the course of doing the background material for this chapter, that quite a few technical works have really started pondering at the genetic level what the hell's going on with Ediacara biota. They're an odd sideball. Everybody agrees that the Ediacara things with these, hello, Slade, that these kind of weird frond-like things in the Dickinsonia that looks like a floor mat that you might have in your bathroom, slightly oval-shaped, about a meter length typically, that they're very basal animal forms, but not the form structures that we're seeing in all those little metazoans that are going to go crazy in the Cambrian explosion. And the thing that, as far as I can tell, Beckley has not thought 1 microsecond on is the issue of whether or not Ediacara organisms had homeobox genes. Did they have Pax genes? Did they have Sonic Hedgehog? I mean, what exactly would be going on in there? Whereas the evolutionary scientists, recognizing that they are very different in the way that they're formulating their systems than what we're seeing in later metazoans that have survived for us to look at in detail, because every one of these critters are extinct, that the genetic systems are triggering in slightly different ways. Although it's surprising how few novel genetic systems are coming up. It turns out that there's only one little thing in relation to like the immune system that is apparently very distinctive of Animalia, and very probably is not involved in these Ediacaran organisms or in odd ways, although they're building off of the genetic systems that must have been presumably in place. I have cataracts and can't see well, so I'll lurk. Okay, Lisa. At no point does Beckley ever ponder the obvious. Okay, they're not related to anything that's alive today. Well, how not related are they? Do they have homeobox genes? Are they made of proteins? Are they made of, do they have DNA at all? RNA at all? Do they have ribosomes? Are they eukaryotes? I mean, just exactly how far removed are these in Beckley's imagination? And he doesn't think about it because his view doesn't have a model. They don't think about it. They don't speculate about anything. Whereas an evolutionary biologist is looking at the layers of things in relation to annelids and sponges and choanoflagellates and all the other things that are structured as to what's branching off of when and what genetic systems are coming into play at various points, that evolutionists are able to increasingly lay out at least the boundary layer of the genetic systems that are putatively involved in these organisms, which means future scientists, those pesky little people that can do paleogenomics, reconstructions of stuff, can, in principle, in the decades to come, start tweaking around to see if they can't find ways of generating these little trilobe organisms like a Trilacobicium or whatever the hell it's called. That's a very mysterious little critter, as well as the frond systems of Carnia and the floor mat Dickinsonia and all of that. It also brings up the issue about whether or not any of them were completely sessile or whether some of them may move. And then the mystery critters that are floating around in the paleontological record about burrowers, for which we have the burrows, but not what made them, and things that are making little trails in the thing. Although in one case, this one particular Icaria that Jackson has done a really nifty little section on, Beckley doesn't like the idea that it's making these trace fossils that trackways. He wants them to be protists, which brings up a little sidebar that's going to be just hilarious. There's a paleontologist, Retallick, who back in the 90s and 2000s, well, actually even longer than that, he'd been pushing for a long time the idea that the Ediacara biota weren't animals and they didn't live underwater, or maybe they didn't live completely underwater. So he was advocating lichen systems for them, and often on the surface. This has not been received well by other paleontologists. And in one of the earlier invocations of Retallick, Beckley doesn't allude to the controversy surrounding the hypothesis of the paper that he had just alluded to and cited as a way of browbeating stuff on the Ediacara biota. Finally, in the 2022 account, he finally acknowledges that there's that Retallick is a maverick. Ooh. Oh, it turns out he's way more than just maverick, because shortly after the Beckley post, a paper that Retallick had done in 2021 with some Indian paleontologists, where they had identified what they thought was a Dickinsonia fossil from India in the Vendean period, got some hilarious pushback in 2023 from both an Indian paleontologist and then also a couple others started weighing in that as they went back and looked at this site, they could see how much weathering in that had happened. And it turned out it was not Dickinsonia, it was a decayed beehive. And that he just had not understood this at all. And so it was, there were all sorts of jokes about the buzz that the find had made and how it didn't turn out. When he pretty much had to admit that, we made a little mistake on that one. But the point is that in this 2022 piece that Beckley put up, Retallick is his only source for browbeating the paleontologists that are arguing that Dickinsonia is an animal and it's not just a big blob of nothing. And so he insists that there are Beckley insists that there's solid evidence for this position independent of the maverick retallic. Well, I got all the original papers involved in the matter, and I'm going to be looking through in very close detail based on the earlier incidents that I've seen where Beckley plays fast and loose with his sources. He's really being cagey in, frankly, the same way that Duane Gish used to, and for the same mechanism that Casey Luskin, the Duane Gish of intelligent design, does. So it's an interesting little area that is time consuming to burrow around with, but fortunately, almost the only papers I haven't been able to get full text on this little cute matter are the very most recent ones that have just come out this year. And there's still ongoing material on this subject. So it's really funky. And what it's looking like is Beckley is staying behind the curve. If anybody example Beckley on Cambrian, whoops, we lost our connection. No, okay. Let me put my patrons up, so that matter firmly and set in mind to remind everybody that without help, this would not be able to do this nearly so. Our colleagues and researchers, assistant researchers, and friends and legacy patrons over the many years, every little bit helps, and the more who can come in and help and add on, if you did $1, $5 a month, whatever you can spare, if you can manage to come in as a supporter of the project, as and Apologia and so many other people have, and have stuck it out up and down, in and out. We firmly every single one of you. From any of the videos that I'm doing, because I'm at Razzle Fancy level of the ones getting the little stats that you can see on the shows that Apologia and Dapper Dino and Erica and others do, and that gets a revenue stream coming into them, although I think they take a chunk off of it, quite a bit of a chunk off of it. Patriots a little chunk off of it as well. But anyway, so there's the bit, as I do all the time, the links to all the books are in the listing, as well as the website, and grab anything you want. Freely share every PDF that's on there. It's all copyright free. Just use them. There's an awful lot of material in there. The 3 macroevolutionary episodes. It's a lot of the benchmarks. Bigger scale for evolution slam dunk on the reptile, and of course rocks with much more material on bird evolution that wasn't available to me 20 years ago when I was doing the stuff for 3 macroevolutionary episodes. But I think you can see the scaffolding of what was going on there, and then the Patreon link is a thing as well. So yeah, we're now flirting with 3-star. And if nobody has any questions on that, I will stick up my advert for our book. Rocks Were There is going to be just as hefty as volume 2 as volume 1 was. I'm hoping we can get it all in just to volume 2. Although if the thing expands to the point where it's absolutely necessary that we split it up into a 2nd and 3rd volume, yeah, we'll have to do it. But hopefully we'll find out once we get the whole volume in and how large the reference bibliography is on all of that. It's a lot of stuff in there. Creationists just keep saying clap, and the intelligent design movement keeps following along next to them. And new stuff keeps coming up that's just absolutely exciting, and such an influx of technical work that it can be bewildering, but it's also effing fun because there's so much stuff going along. So let me put up our little advertisement for the old video here. Which I understand from people who watch this is loud. So we will just have to go with that. And there are the books. It's the one thing I'll be making a point of, because I got feedback from people on the ebook versions of the other stuff, is that the info boxes, to keep them structured differently for that's going to be put on, because it was getting split up on Curve. I'm an old person that can remember dial, tuner, rabbit ear television sets, and pay telephones. I'm not quite far back as automobiles and ice boxes with actual ice in them that my mom would have had. But nonetheless, I'm from an old period, and so I'm doing YouTubes on my laptop. Thank you, Scientist Mel, for giving me that laptop, and flipping along with all the little technologies that I can make use of. We are doing the best we can as an old person. Anyway, everybody stay really kind of a little warm slot in here. We'll find out whether, given the circumstances, to whether I'll be doing a show on the Easter weekend or not, because I'm going to be over with my niece's family for that, and then back in by the time of the next show. So I'll figure out what I'm on. So it's not certain as to whether or not I'll want to go with the show on there on that Sunday or not. We'll see. Circumstances being what they are. It all depends on how the weather so far. It's not weather. We had some really bad storms up at the Cascades in this storm system that came through over the past few weeks, and so I'm going to be keeping an eye out for what the Snoqualmie Passing is like towards the tail end of the month. With a little luck, it'll be smooth, and then we will be back here working on our little project, as well as our third paralogue story. If you like fiction, if you rip snorting steampunky adventure with interesting characters and surprisingly accurate history, and surprising plots, hopefully, that will not be what you typically have found in other people's fictions, give them a whack. And 2 out now, and hopefully by the time we're out, the publication for the third book will be about the same time that we're doing the volume 2 of The Rocks Were There. So we'll wing it as we can. We've got a half hour in here, and covered all the bits, giving you some little bit of skivvy about what's up in the next projects and the like. And we will be continuing our foray through Sarfatian Tay, which the only thing about it is that can be observed that it's a really small scale whack at dinosaurs. They barely scratch the surface on theropods. It looks like they're probably overplaying the number of sauropod taxa that they're putting in, given how few kinds they think they are. And I'll be wanting to see, do they delve into Camarasaurids and a lot of these other groups, Melanosaurids and that are at the area, or basically are they going with just Diplodocids and Brachiosaurs and forgetting everything else? We'll find that out in the next chapter, and also see what kind of technical literature and that's going on. So if their idea was to have a really significant kick butt kind of contribution to the creationist apologetics in this area, nah, it's not cutting it so far. So everybody stay care. Keep an eye out for rampaging wooden penguins. You can never trust them. And we will be seeing you kids all next week, hopefully. Au revoir.